Pastor Dan here from Dexter Gospel Church. Thanks for watching this Proverbs Practical. Today's verse is the second half of one of the most famous passages in Proverbs, and it gives some reassurance about God's working in our decisions. We're in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6. It says, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." So a lot of the time we lump verses 5 and 6 together. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not into thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Verse 5 telling us to trust God with all of our hearts, don't lean on our own understanding. But if you notice, these are two separate sentences. In doing this, when we lump those two verses, those two sentences together, we end up creating three conditions for God to direct our paths. But I have to wonder if these two verses, these two sentences, aren't each intended to stand on their own. And if that's the case, then there's only one condition for God to direct our paths, and that is for us to acknowledge him in all our ways. There's no connecting word like and or even between the two verses. Now, to be fair, a lot of verses in Proverbs are linked. The next two verses have a triplet of conditions and then a promise, and the previous two verses have something similar. But verses 1 and 2 only have two conditions for a whole string of promises. So it's not that we can lock it in and say there's this pattern that we have to follow. For the moment, I'm just going to act as though verse 6 stands alone and gives us one simple truth that we have to apply in order to have God direct our paths. First, let's talk about directing our paths. Now, notice that it is not God directing us, but God directing our paths. Now, I suppose you could take this to mean that God directs us down the path or directs us as to which path to take or something like that, but it doesn't seem to mean that. It's a very similar expression to what's used in the prophecy that John the Baptist would make straight the paths of the Lord, or would prepare the way for the Messiah. Now, obviously, John the Baptist did not tell Jesus where to go, tell him which paths to take. Rather, John the Baptist prepared the path itself, so that where Jesus went, Jesus' work accomplished what God wanted it to. Thus, this becomes more a matter of him blessing our wise decisions than having a precision decision that we have to make at every step to be on the right path. In wisdom, we end up taking a path that is God approved and then God blessed. This blessing doesn't necessarily mean ease or prosperity, of course. It can simply be accomplishing God's purpose and bringing God glory through this path. But then those should be our greatest desires anyway, right? So the outcome, either God directing us to take the right steps or God working through the steps that we take in wisdom. What's the condition then? To acknowledge God. Put simply, that means to take knowledge of God, to know God. It means to act based on our knowledge of God. When we walk or when we act with the knowledge of God as the driving force in our decisions, then we walk in wise paths, and God arranges those paths that we take. It says we should do this in all our ways. That means that when we make decisions, God is always in the picture. That there's no part of our life where we don't take our knowledge of him and consider what he would have us to do and apply what we know about God to the decision that we're making. You can make this as big as trusting him for salvation or as small as what you eat for a snack. How does the knowledge of God and his will impact how we spend our time, our resources, our efforts, and so on? Of course, the converse is true too. If we act without acknowledging God, as if God doesn't exist or as if what we know about him isn't true, is it any wonder if things don't turn out well? It ends up becoming the person in James who makes their plans without considering what God might desire. But it's a precious principle to me that if I'm making my decisions with God consciously in mind, putting his thinking and his desires first, then he will work in or through my decisions to accomplish his will. So if there's a part of your life you don't really want God's help with, well, feel free to make those decisions without taking your knowledge of him into account. But in any area of your life where you do want God to work for good in the outcomes of your decisions, take him into account in those decisions, who he is and what he would want. I hope this video is a help to you. If so, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more comments on the scriptures. We'd love to see you in person here at Dexter Gospel Church. We'd love to see you in the comments for these videos. Until next time, I hope you stay well, and remember God in every decision.